some people didn't make it and I forgot to record it. I'm trying to get these all recorded as well. So I'm going to be talking about seabird restoration on the Channel Islands, primarily focusing on Anacapa Island and some of the restoration work that we've been doing out there for about the last 20 years. And this little cutie guy in the picture is a Scripps merlet, which is one of the species that's a target of our restoration work. It's in the alcid family. It's in the same family as puffins, and it's a rare seabird that breeds here on the southern Channel Islands. So just to give you guys a little background on the Channel Islands, the Channel Islands National Park consists of 5 of the 8 Channel Islands off the Pacific coast, sort of circled here. All the islands are close to shore, yeah, but you know, as you guys know, living down here in Southern California, they're close to a very densely populated area. But fortunately, the islands have remained pretty much undeveloped, especially the islands in the national park, and they're a haven for wildlife, both on the islands and in the ocean. And you know, it's also the ability for people to get a real wilderness experience with only an hour boat ride from Ventura or Santa Barbara. The park covers 249,561 acres, of which 79,000 acres are federal land. The Nature Conservancy owns and manages 76% of Santa Cruz Island. So Santa Cruz is right here, which is the largest island of all 8. Okay, here comes somebody. Let me admit this person. Yeah, how do I do that? Hold on, sorry. Participants, admit, okay, here we go. Sorry. Let me close this. So these are the parts of the Channel Islands National Park consists of Anacapa Island, Santa Cruz Island, Santa Rosa, and San Miguel, and also a little Santa Barbara Island that sits off down to the south. Santa Catalina, which is an island that maybe people here are familiar with, is a populated island. People live on Catalina, except for 2 harbors areas, more of a wildernessy area. San Nicolas Island and San Clemente are actually owned and maintained by the Navy, and they do live fire operations both on the island and shooting things off the island. So the public only has access to the National Park Islands and Catalina Island. I seem to have lost my mouse, sorry. Oops, there we go. So the islands are home to incredible biodiversity, and they're home to significant natural and cultural resources. Anacapa and Santa Barbara Islands were made a national monument in 1983, and then all 8 of the islands became a biosphere reserve under UNESCO in 1976. And then, like I mentioned, the 5 that are part of the national park was founded in 1980. Just interesting, all three but Anacapa are in Santa Barbara County, but Anacapa is actually in Ventura County. And then, I should go back to this, but then surrounding the islands, the waters surrounding the islands are part of the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, which encompasses the waters of 6 nautical miles around the park. And that's managed by the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, which is the agency that I work for, and the islands themselves are managed by the National Park Service. So there are more than 2,000 species of plants and animals that can be found within the Channel Islands National Park. So it's really a haven for biodiversity. Some really unique species like this scrub jay is a island scrub jay that you can find on Santa Cruz Island, is what we call an endemic. So it's a species of bird that's only found on Santa Cruz Island. There's also a large amount of rare and endemic plants on the islands, as well as some unique mammals, such as this deer mouse that's found on almost all the islands except for, well, it's actually found on all the islands. So there are only 3 mammals that are endemic to the island. And like I said, one of them is the deer mouse. There's also the spotted skunk and the Channel Islands fox, which is, I thought was in a picture here, but maybe not. So the Channel Islands National, the fox is not found on Anacapa Island. So that'll make more sense and is in significance as I get further into the talk. This is just a pretty view of looking out on Anacapa Island, which is really the focus of this talk. Around the islands, the marine life ranges from microscopic plankton to the endangered blue whale, which is the largest animal on Earth. There's also significant archaeological and cultural resources are found on all the islands, which span a period of more than 10,000 years. And like I mentioned, there's 24 endemic plants. So Anacapa is really famous for its views. This is the looking out of East Anacapa, looking at Middle and West, and Santa Cruz in the background. And this view is called Inspiration Point, which is considered one of the most beautiful sights to see in California. And also is famous for this arch rock located down here, which was formed by wind and waves as eroded away that that rock that sits off the island. And that arch is really a famous landmark for Channel Islands National Park. So like I mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of diversity in the park. Lots of endangered plants, also salamanders, lizards, even a snail, and like I mentioned, the Anacapa deer mouse. So now to talk about seabirds on the island. It's critical habitat for a wide variety of seabirds in Southern California. Anacapa Island contains the largest colony of breeding seabirds in Southern California. It's actually, a lot of people don't realize this, the only island in California that pelicans breed, primarily on Middle and West Anacapa, with a small amount of pelicans breeding on Santa Barbara Island. So those islands are really critical habitat for seabirds to have a place where they can breed and be safe from disturbance by humans and also from predators. So there's 14 breeding species of seabirds on the islands. So one of them being the California brown pelican that I was just talking about. Western gulls, this pigeon guillemot, Brandt's cormorant, and Scripps murrelet. So the Scripps murrelet is, like I said, a very rare seabird that we have here in Southern California. It's a small bird. It's under 10 inches in length. It's slightly smaller than an American robin, just for reference. Adults have a 15-inch wingspan and it weighs only 6 ounces. This is what the little chick looks like. It's a little fuzzball. The adults are black above and white on the chin. It's a member of, like I said, the auk family, or alcids, which is the same family as puffins. So some unique attributes of the Scripps murrelet: it only comes ashore to breed. It remains at sea the rest of the year. The Channel Islands National Park has 80% of the U.S. breeding population of Scripps murrelets. There's a small colony. The largest colony is on Santa Barbara Island, but that is, if not already eclipsed by the rapidly growing population on Anacapa Island, which it was a result of removing the rats from the island, which was one of the projects that we funded, and I'll talk about that in a bit. The Scripps murrelets nest in natural rock crevices around the edges of the island. The females lay 2 eggs, and the eggs are really big. It contains 22% of the female's body weight when they lay the eggs, so they're really big eggs. And they're incubated for about a month. So when the chicks are hatched, they're fully feathered and well developed, so they're called precocial. So that means they can leave the nest really quickly. So they actually fledge at like 3 days old. They can't even fly at that point. They just kind of tumble down off the cliffs into the ocean, and then they're raised by their parents on the ocean. So it's a way to avoid predators and also to reduce the energy of the parents having to bring food back and forth to them. They can just bring the chicks to the food. So they're a hard bird to study because they leave really quickly. So you have a very small window to be able to document if they actually hatched or not. And then it leaves the nest, and it's on at the open ocean at about 2 days old. So you can just see these tiny little fuzzballs out on the ocean just floating around. And then it takes about 34 days for the parents to incubate the eggs before they hatch. The Scripps murrelet was listed as a threatened species by the state of California in 2004. And we had petitioned for it to be federally listed, or at least threatened, federally listed as threatened, but that was not approved. There's another picture of an adult. I've got another person coming in. Hold on. So there's a picture of an adult coming in with the little chick underneath it. That's sort of give you an idea of what the habitat looks like. They don't really build a nest, they just lay them right on the rocks there. Get back here.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, Ron.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'm just getting started. So the other species that we have in the Channel Islands that is also a rare scarce seabird is the ashy storm petrel. It's a member of the storm petrel family. It breeds primarily on islands off the coast of California and Mexico. And it's one of 6 species of storm petrels that lives in and feeds on the California current, Ashley storm petrels breed on 17 islands in the Pacific. The largest population of Ashley storm petrels in California is on the Farallon Islands in the Bay Area near San Francisco, but they also breed on 8 of the Channel Islands in California, and there's populations of the birds in Mexico as well. So it's also a really unique, rare seabird that breeds on the Channel Islands. It's a tube-nosed bird, so it actually can drink seawater, and then it exerts the salts through that sort of big nasal gland on its nose. So it's kind of unique. That's why they're called tube noses. The same family as albatrosses. And then the Cassis auklet is another species, another family, another bird in the alcid family that also breeds in the Channel Islands, as well as in many spots along the California coast, but and in Baja. And then we have a new species breeding on the islands now. As of last year, we have brown boobies nesting off Santa Barbara Island. This is not a bird that traditionally nested in California. It breeds in Mexico. But as we're seeing the waters are warming, from global warming and sea surface temperatures rising, we're seeing species moving up from southern climates into our climates because of the warm water. So now we have a pretty large population of brown boobies nesting on the Channel Islands. So I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing, but it's exciting to have a new species on the island. So seabirds face an enormous amount of threats to their populations, primarily from habitat loss, marine pollution, climate change, ocean acidification. Like I was just talking about, climate change, ocean acidification, harvesting. Traditionally, people harvested seabird eggs as well as seabirds themselves. Tourism, and then one of the largest impacts, then what I work on quite a bit, is invasive species. So why are we involved in seabird restoration on the Channel Islands? So I manage a program called the Montrose Settlements Restoration Program, and it's funded from a settlement against the Montrose Company, who operated a DDT facility in Torrance from the late 1940s to the early 1980s. The facility discharged millions of pounds of DDT into the sanitation system of the LACSD. And eventually, as this visual is showing, it found its way into the ocean outfall off the Palos Verdes Peninsula and into the ocean. The discharges were taken under control in the early 1970s. And then in 1972, the permit to discharge waste products was pulled by the sanitation district. And in the mid-1970s, the use of DDT was banned. And then production was finally banned in 1981. So we have this large deposit of DDT. Is estimated that between 1947 and 1971, more than 1,800 tons of DDT were discharged through the sewer system. And an additional 500 tons were dumped at deep water sites off Catalina Island.
So Jen, that discharge was actually permitted until it was shut down?
It was permitted by the sanitation district because early on, no one really knew that DDT was a problem. I mean, people thought DDT was a solution to mosquitoes and controlling pests, so it was allowed to be used pretty regularly, pretty liberally. So we inherited this legacy case of this contamination that's still there today off the Palos Verdes Peninsula, although reduced in amount. So one of the things to point out about DDT is that it goes through a process that we call biomagnification. So as the contaminants move up the food chain, they increase in potency and in amount. So small benthic invertebrates consume the DDT from the sediment, and then fish eat the invertebrates, and then sea lions, eagles, and seabirds and peregrine falcons eat the fish, and then birds like peregrine falcons eat the birds. So every time it moves up the food chain, it becomes more and more stronger. So that's why species like we saw the bald eagles go extinct from the Channel Islands, and we saw large impacts to seabirds and sea lions and peregrine falcons from the DDT, which causes their eggshells to become very thin. And when the birds would sit on the eggs to incubate them, they would break in the nest. And that whole process was really discovered on Anacapa Island when they went out to study the pelicans, and they saw that all the eggs in the nests were broken. And that's how they first documented the impacts of DDT, which then was a, across the whole world, was causing problems to these high-level trophic feeders, like particularly raptor species. So the federal and state governments, 3 federal and 3 state agencies, which are, their logos are down here, and NOAA was the primary lead in this case, filed a lawsuit against the Montrose company. We focused on injuries to bald eagles, peregrine falcons, seabirds, and fish. And in 2001, after a lengthy, very lengthy process, we received approximately $30 million for natural resource restoration work. And then there was a separate part of the settlement that went to EPA for their, to determine whether they were going to actually do any kind of cleanup of the site in terms of like removing the DDT and doing any kind of capping or remediation, which is still under study. So we received our $30 million, and we've been implementing restoration projects with that money since 2001. We did earn some interest on that, so we were able to stretch the money a little bit more because we were able to put it in an interest earning account early on, back when we were making interest on money. So that was a good thing. So we focused, like I mentioned, on a variety of projects. I'm going to talk primarily now about the bird restoration projects that Montrose has been involved in. I had given a talk, and maybe I'll redo that one on one of these two for an Audubon group on the bald eagle restoration. We released young eagles onto Santa Cruz Island over a series of years, and in what they call hack towers, and then we monitored them, and they are now breeding on almost all of the Channel Islands in really big numbers. So really confident that bald eagles are now back to stay on the Channel Islands. We've been doing peregrine falcon monitoring for many years, documenting their recovery. And like I've been talking about, we're doing quite a lot of seabird habitat restoration work. We worked on Santa Barbara Island. We've worked on Scorpion Rock off Santa Cruz Island and on Anacapa Island most recently. We also did work for ashy storm petrels on a rock offshore Santa Cruz Island, and we were involved in quite a large project removing feral cats from San Nicolas Island, which could be a great talk unto itself. That was an interesting project of partnering with the Navy and the Humane Society to have the cats taken off of the island. So very successful. And we also were involved in a long-term project in Baja, California, doing habitat restoration work for seabirds on all of the Baja Islands in California, in Mexico. But so before I get into our habitat work, I just kind of set the stage a little bit on some work that we've done, that I've been involved in on Anacapa prior to the Montrose work. This was funded with a settlement from the American trader oil spill that occurred in Huntington Beach. We funded the eradication of black rats from Anacapa Island. So just to give you guys a little bit of background and not to be too preachy at you guys, but I'm just going to try to drive home how important islands are for seabirds and the impacts that invasive species have on seabirds on islands. So islands have unfortunately become extinction epicenters. So 75% of reptile, bird, amphibian, and mammal extinctions combined have occurred on islands. Invasive species, which primarily spread around the globe from human transportation in boats or other transportation vehicles, are the leading cause of extinctions on islands and biodiversity loss globally. Invasive species are implicated in 86% of all recorded extinctions on islands. But islands do offer hope. We've been around the globe, people have been working on restoring islands and eradicating invasive mammals, and it's proven to be a highly impactful conservation action. Just some examples to give you guys: the Pinzon giant tortoise hatchlings survived for the first time in 150 years after rat eradication in the Galapagos. Biologists documented a 5,000% increase in native tree recruitment on Palmyra Atoll after rat eradication. And like the project we're talking about today, the Scripps Merlet on Anacapa Island rebounded a 3-fold increase in hatching success following eradication of invasive rodents. So to date, there have been 450 islands successfully had predators removed from them, invasive predators removed, with about an 80 to 95% success rate. Norway rats have the highest rates of success, and mice have been a little bit more challenging to eradicate. And also it seems to be easier to do eradications in tropical locations, just given logistics and easier to work on. Like this is a little bit more what I was saying before that, but rats in particular on islands, rats are responsible for 40 to 60% of all bird and reptile extinctions worldwide. Over 80% of the world's islands have introduced rats on them. It's a pretty amazing number. There have been 450 successful eradications of rats and mice from islands. So this is just, the pictures down here show you, this is a rat, this is on an infrared camera on Anacapa Island, and we actually put dummy eggs into the nest so we could document the rats. And this was really important because we had a lot of public opposition to this project. So it was really important to have really good data to show that we have documented the impacts that rats are having on the seabirds. And this picture just shows a rat, an eggshell that's been broken and eaten by rats. And there's one of the breeding scripts marlets. So, you know, these birds on islands are incredibly vulnerable to introduced predators, primarily because they are not at all used to predators. They don't have any defenses against predators. They're not traditionally supposed to be on the island, so they will just not really defend themselves. Not to be too graphic, but in Hawaii on Midway Island, where they're having a big problem with invasive mice, the albatrosses will actually sit on their eggs, and the mice will be eating the birds alive while they're still incubating their eggs. So it's just not something that is in their, you know, their mind that they should be scared of these predators. So like something like a cat on an island can just cause huge damage, and rats as well. And they also breed prolifically, rats. So, you know, you can just have two, they can just take off, and you can have a huge number of rats in a very short period of time. So our goal on Anacapa Island was to restore the seabird nesting habitat, but we also wanted to protect like I mentioned, there was an endemic deer mouse on the island, so we needed to make sure that we could restore the deer mouse as well after we had eradicated the rats. And we wanted to also restore the naturally functioning populations of raptors, reptiles, and invertebrates. So the rats are actually eating a large amount of invertebrate species on the intertidal area as well. So removing the rats had a whole ecosystem benefit, not just to seabirds. But it was an incredibly challenging project because of the steep, rugged topography of the island. We also had to protect the federally, at that time it was federally endangered California brown pelican, and like I mentioned, the endemic deer mouse. So we did the project in phases. So the project, we dropped a poison, a rodenticide, from this helicopter here. It covered the island in a grid-like fashion. It had a hopper hanging from below the helicopter, and it rotated and dispersed the bait. It had a baffle on the sides to keep it from going into the water, and the bait was dispensed, and then the rats consumed the bait, and then they died. And most of the rats, or 90% of the rats, died underground in crevices and burrows underground. But to protect the mice, we did it in phases. So we treated the east first, and then we treated middle and west. And when we treated east, we still had a population of mice on middle and west. And we also held a population of mice in captivity on the islands. We had done genetic studies to make sure we had enough diversity, and so that we could re-release them. And then we had already re-released the mice back onto east when we treated middle and west. So there was always a viable population of mice during the project. And then following all the eradication was done, and then the bait was dispersed, we re-released those captive mice back onto the island, and now the mice are doing better than ever on the island. Oh, we had a really robust monitoring program that was part of this eradication work. We did baseline nest monitoring of the birds prior to the eradication. From 2001 to 2002, we did actually a lot more years of this post-eradication work. We actually did almost 20 years of monitoring post-eradication, looking at changes in breeding success and population trends. And we did nocturnal spotlight surveys around the islands using a Zodiac boat and using a spotlight. These birds are nocturnal, I didn't mention that, so they're only active at night, making it even more hard to study them. So we would go out in a Zodiac and use a spotlight to shine the lights on them and get a count of the number of birds on the island, and use that as a ratio to develop a population estimate. This is to show you the hatching success, how hatching success changed pre and post rat eradication. So we had an 82% post eradication hatching success versus 30% pre-eradication. So just dramatically different, in huge increase in hatching success once the rats were removed. And this is a little bit more complicated graph, but it shows you the growth rate in the sea caves. So the birds were, the only place the birds could really hang on and breed when the rats were on the island were in the sea caves, because the rats could still get there, but not in huge numbers. So that was where we were doing all of our monitoring of the breeding birds. And you can see that it had a per annum growth rate of 11% in the sea caves and 18.6 in the non-cave plots. So, you know, the numbers just, you know, once the rats were gone, the numbers just exploded. So the birds were there, they were trying to breed, but they were failing. And once the rats were gone, we saw huge success in their breeding. This is the results of the Round Island Spotlight surveys that we did. Also a huge increase, 5.6 to 9.8 per annum growth from 2002 to 2014. So those are kind of numbers you never see, like in a seabird population, especially as seabirds in general are slow. They have slow fecundity, slow population growth. They start breeding later in life, around 4 or 5, and they only lay 2 eggs, some only 1. So it takes a lot of time for their populations to really increase. So this kind of growth was really remarkable. And we saw great increases in these nocturnal crevice nesters that I was talking about. So the Cassin's auklet, which I mentioned in the beginning, pre-eradication, we had no confirmed breeding of these species on Anacapa Island. Post-eradication, we found our first 2 nests in 2003, and then by 2010, we had 11 nests, and the numbers are continuing to increase. And the Ashley storm petrel as well, we had no confirmed breeding on the island with rats there, and post-eradication, we discovered our first nest in 2011. So I'm starting to see species just really rebound really quickly. So then we shifted gears to the to habitat restoration following the rat eradication. You know, now that we had removed the predators from the island, we were starting to see the populations increase, and we really wanted to look at whether the island had the habitat to support the birds to breed there. As I mentioned, they were breeding in the sea caves, but eventually that sea cave habitat was going to be full, and the birds were going to start expanding out onto the rest of the island, which they would have bred in historically. So we wanted to make sure there was habitat there for them to come to. So one of the other scourges of the Channel Islands is ice plant. So ice plant is a problem all over California, but particularly bad on islands. It was first brought to Anacapa by the Coast Guard in the 1940s and the 50s for landscaping and erosion control. The Coast Guard had a staff that maintained the lighthouse on the island. So and also there was soil disturbance from construction and building roads for by the Coast Guard. So all that led to just the invasive plants just really getting a foothold on the island. In addition, the native plant communities on Anacapa were devastated by sheep grazing in the 1980s and 90s, rabbit browsing in the 1900s. You know, all this created large-scale destruction of the native vegetation. So all of the Channel Islands had tremendous impacts from grazing, from ranching, from construction. You know, so it's a long process of restoring all these native populations back to what they were historically. So after only small patches still remain of native plants on the island. So this is just to show you some of the ice plant. You know, and this yellow plant is a native plant. That's the giant coreopsis, which is really a magnificent plant out there when it blooms. You can see how big the invasive grasses and the weeds are on the island, especially in big rain years. So in 2012, the park worked on a project to eradicate the non-native red gum ice plant from Anacapa. It was a 3-year project that ended in 2015. It was somewhat successful. They did remove a tremendous amount of ice plant, but they didn't really plant any other plants to replace it. So the island was pretty barren, and also then allowed the ice plant to return. So the Montrose project started working on Anacapa. We were working on Santa Barbara Island, and we, through a series of storms, had lost the dock on Santa Barbara Island. And so the Park Service was not going to be replacing that dock anytime soon, and we didn't have the capacity to continue to work out there without a way to bring equipment and people onto the island. So we were looking for someplace else to shift our work to, and this Anacapa work was a perfect fit. And we could take all that we had learned on Santa Barbara Island and apply it to Anacapa. So our goal in particular was to restore native vegetation and increase seabird habitat quality for our target species. And we were working on this restoration site where we knew that murrelets and owlets were nesting in the caves below here. So with the hope that if we built the habitat for them above on the mainland, that they could expand out into that habitat. So our goals were to remove the non-native vegetation, and we've done that by a variety of hand pulling and also some herbicide use, monitor recovery of the ecosystem, and we really wanted to get volunteers involved in the work. Anacapa is only about an hour boat ride away from the mainland. There's regular transportation by Island Packers, which is the concessionaire that transports people to the island. And so we started a program of bringing school groups out to help us with the restoration work, and that's been really great way for the kids to be involved in hands-on restoration work and really be able to come back year after year and see how things have changed and be part of a long-term project. So we started in 2016. That year we planted 2,500 plants. So we grow everything from seed on the island. We can't be bringing plants from the island out there because we could be bringing bugs and other seeds. We have to grow everything there from seeds that we collect on the island. We built a new nursery and grow out tables to facilitate growing all the seeds. So in the summer, we propagate the plants. In the fall, we outplant. And then in the winter, spring, we weed. So because the weeds never stop coming back. So we've been involved in this kind of process for several years, this year being our last year of, well, at least the last year of Montrose's funding out there. And we have been able to secure some grant funds to keep the work going without our funding, which is great. So this is what the new well, not so new anymore, but the greenhouse looks like that we built. This is some of our plants. When they get too big to be in the greenhouse, they go out to the outside tables to harden up before they get put in the ground. And this is some of the little plants, and then they become big plants. So it's a process of a lot of labor, taking the little plants and moving them into the next size container and the next size container. So that's why we need a lot of volunteers. And here's some of the volunteers out here planting. And we've got, we've already seen some success already. This is some of our western gulls breeding under some of our restored habitat. And we also put in some artificial burrows for the birds to nest on to make it more appealing to them. And in the next couple of years, we might start using sound to start attracting them into these sites. It takes several years for the plants to get big enough to provide habitat for the birds. And so now that some of the plants are getting big enough, we're going to start trying to attract them into the habitat. And some of the before and afters, these are all native plants that we planted. This is what it looked like before. The ice plant gets all dry and dormant in the winter. But it's still there and easier to pull then. And this is and we have drip irrigation now set up on all the restoration plots, which has been great for us to for them to get water because we're trying to do all this restoration in one of the biggest droughts of the century. So, and we have no natural water on the island as well. So you should know. So all the water has to come out a ship, and then it gets stored in tanks, and then we can pump it out to the restoration sites. Other before and after, and this is just some of the data from our surveys. Some of the key things to look at here. It's just the baseline in 2016. That you can see the non-native cover. It was really high, and now we've really beaten that down into 0.9 in 2018. The native cover went from 5% to 31%. Amount of bare rock is about the same, but the bare ground also the same. So you can see that we're really changing the pattern from native to non-native, from non-native to native plants. But every year it's a battle with the weeds and the ice plant coming back. But eventually we will get to that point where the seed bank is done, has been eliminated for the ice plant, and we won't have to be doing so much weeding. And that's just to show me that I do get in the field and get my hands dirty. And this is some of the Camino folks will know some of these folks. I've had some of my friends come out and help out there, so it's been really fun. and do some hard manual work. These are some of the plants we pull out of there. They're huge. They can, especially when we get big rain winters. It's good for the native plants, but also allows the non-natives to really grow. Another nice view of Anacapa. Oh, and then just a little, this is one of my colleagues that we've been working together for 20 years originally from Fish and Wildlife Service and now with Park Service. So we have to take an annual picture every year at Inspiration Point. So the future of the program, like I said, we're winding down. We are finished with the bald eagle work. We're in our last year of habitat work on Santa Barbara. The Mexico work is done, but we're helping all of our projects to find, partner funding and grant funding so that the work can continue, because we've done built so much infrastructure and started so much great work out there. We really want to try to see it continue beyond our funding. But yeah, we couldn't do it all without partners. Just so many partners helped us for so many years to make all this work happen. And then I'm just going to show you real quick. There's a short little video about the Anacapa project, which is a great overview of the project. So let me just make sure this plays. Hold on. Now I just have to do this. Close that. Hold on. Let me make it full screen down here. Yeah, I'm gonna move you. Here we go.
Anacapa Island, one of the Channel Islands, just 11 miles off the coast of Southern California. Comprised of 3 islets, Anacapa's steep cliffs, vegetated terrain, and protected beaches provide safe haven for a variety of marine mammals and seabirds.
Hey, Jen, I'm not seeing any video.
Anacapa is part of the Channel.
Sorry, is everybody else?
Nope.
You guys see the video?
No,
You can't see it?
no,
I
no
just
video.
see the URL
That's weird.
address, and that's it.
Okay, hold on. Let me do
No
a different
video.
way then. Hold on, sorry. I will
Audio,
share it not in
yes,
the
video, no.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to go to a different way. Sorry. I thought I could do it through the slideshow, but maybe now. Let's try this. Whoops. Let me close this because I want you guys to see it. Hold on. Close. All right. Can you see that? Can you see it now? No, there's no-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's going.
You can find here on the
Yeah.
mainland.
Okay, let me start it over again. Sorry, thanks.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Anacapa Island, one of the Channel Islands, just 11 miles off the coast of Southern California. Comprised of 3 islets, Anacapa's steep cliffs, vegetated terrain, and protected beaches provide safe haven for a variety of marine mammals and seabirds. Anacapa is part of the Channel Islands National Park and lies within a marine sanctuary.
You go out to Anacapa Island and you're really in a world apart, where you see seabirds and marine mammals and just a wilderness experience that you can't find here on the mainland any longer. Anacapa became part of Channel Islands National Park in the 1980s. We knew the history of this island. We knew it had been an important place for seabirds. So we're trying to protect that for future generations.
Protecting Anacapa includes keeping the island free of invasive predators found on the mainland. But during the 80s and 90s, resource managers noticed a steady decline in the population of some species of seabirds on Anacapa. One of the primary reasons, predation. by the non-native black rat.
This is the black rat, or the ship rat. We caught him in a building here on the island. After feeding on a summer of seabirds and eggs, he's now looking for more food. There's no more seabirds on the island, so now he's looking far and wide for some of the food that he's used to.
In this infrared footage, a rat is seen attacking decoy eggs placed in a nesting site on Anacapa. The eggs are similar in size and appearance to native seabird eggs.
I mean, the rats affected everything here. They affected the gulls, they affected the murrelets, they affected the mice, they affected the lizards, they affected the vegetation.
The rats prey heavily on a rare nocturnal seabird named the Scripps' murrelet. There are 4 primary breeding islands in the world for these seabirds, and Anacapa is one of them. In the 1990s, estimates indicated there were only 1,500 breeding pairs in all of the Channel Islands, with several hundred of them nesting in the cliffs and caves of Anacapa.
This is an egg that's been eaten by a rat that we found in one of the sea caves at Anacapa Island. You can see the serrated edge with big bite marks where the rats come along and chomped it. This one was really fresh and the rat got it right after it was laid.
It was discouraging because everything we found was broken eggshells. You go into a refuge cave and you find the egg. Next time you go there, the egg is broken, there's no bird.
Broken eggshell that had been...
It is unclear exactly how the rats found their way onto Anacapa.
We don't know exactly when they came out here. Probably came in the late 1800s, perhaps on a shipwreck that occurred north of the island. Or perhaps they came when the Coast Guard was building the lighthouse and the associated structures on Anacapa.
Rats are found on 90% of the world's islands. Estimates indicate that half of the bird and reptile extinctions in the world are due to predation by rats.
It was really important that we brought back this potential habitat here on Anacapa Island, and we provided that and allowed, once again, for murrelets to be able to nest here.
Given the chronic threat to the seabird populations on Anacapa, a group of government, university, and nonprofit organizations partnered together in the late 90s to rid the island of the black rat and document the subsequent restoration.
The removal of invasive species from islands is a very important and a critical conservation tool. And since in the 1980s, there's been roughly about 400 rat eradications worldwide.
The project was funded using settlement funds from the 1990 American Trader oil spill in Huntington Beach, the largest oil spill in Southern California in the last few decades.
The American Trader Trustee Council oversees a restoration fund, and it's a really unique program in that the polluter is responsible for paying for these restoration projects and compensating the public for the damages to the natural resources that they caused.
But given that a single pair of rats can theoretically produce over 5,000 offspring in just 1 year, it was clear removing them from the island would be a significant challenge.
The cliffs of Anacapa represented the most daunting challenges, and then compounded by the fact that not only are there rats on the island, but there's this native endemic mouse, endemic to the islands of Anacapa.
Sorry.
So we spent 4 years designing a program.
I'm having internet problems. Come on.
That would have the maximum likelihood of
Sorry, guys.
eliminating every last rat while still conserving the other native species that are unique to Anacapa Island.
The team developed a strategy based on an innovative technique that had been pioneered in New Zealand, using helicopters to distribute a specially formulated rodenticide. This was the first time an application procedure like this would take place in North America.
I lost sleep I certainly lost sleep at times because we conducted a new and novel technique to us in North America here, but basically adopting technology and techniques that others overseas, particularly New Zealand, had been using for a number of years.
One of the primary concerns of the team was how to minimize the impact of the rodenticide on the island ecosystem, starting with the native deer mice.
We want to know how the mice are functioning as a population before the bait drop, because they'll be affected by the same bait as the rats are.
As insurance, native mice were held in a protected shed until the rodenticide application was finished. The mice were then released the following spring, when food resources were more abundant on the island. Other precautions included capturing and removing the birds of prey that frequented the island before and after the bait was dropped. In some cases, using a great horned owl to flush the raptors out.
We're attempting to capture all the birds of prey, especially the species of special concern, and the ones that are most likely to feed on carrion that has some of the poison bait in it.
Finally, after years of preparation, on a cool, clear December day in 2001, the bait was loaded onto the island and the application began.
I remember an early morning start.
The helicopter scheduled today at 7 o'clock.
And then the helicopter. You can hear the helicopter coming in from behind. Everybody was in position. We loaded the first hopper load, or the first bait bucket load of bait. And I remember standing on the landing zone, looking at our pilot, and basically giving him the thumbs up, you can go, and him lifting off, and then he started to spread bait.
The team also applied additional bait by hand along cliffs and the shoreline, taking extra precautions to get the pellets into the areas where rats were known to forage.
The implementation of the rat eradication from Anacapa took 2 years to prepare for, and it took about 2 weeks to actually implement that project. And then the waiting started.
For several weeks after the application, the team carefully monitored bait intake and the activity of radio-collared rats. It appears most of the rats took the bait and died in their burrows. Though some raptors and songbirds were lost to the rodenticide, within 6 months, peregrine falcons reappeared on the island. There were also indications the winter survivorship of the native side-blotch lizards had significantly increased since the eradication.
We started monitoring the side-blotched lizards, and we saw great survivorship of the juvenile side-blotched, higher than what it had been when rats were on the island. That's incredible information. Before that, we did not understand that rats were having that kind of impact on the native reptiles and amphibians on Anacapa Island.
During the spring of 2002, the captive deer mice were released back onto the island. Within months, they reproduce and start steadily moving towards their original population levels.
These are the first generation from the captive mice that were released back in April, and they seem to be doing really well.
Ten years after the initial eradication, the benefit of removing rats from the island becomes increasingly evident.
The deer mouse populations for this Anacapa subspecies has gone up as a direct result of the rat eradication. Tag this mouse. There we go, perfect.
It's only been 10 years since we implemented Anacapa. In ecological time, it's just a drop in the bucket. But the changes were documented or have been documented on the island are incredible.
The seabirds are recovering. They're expanding outside of the sea caves. We're seeing them recolonize areas where they were never thought to be nesting when the rats were present, and to see new species come to the island, discovering ashy storm petrels nests on the island, cast and sauklets on the island.
And it told us that these birds are ready, willing, and able to utilize these islands, but they just don't have the habitat to do it in.
As for the Scripps' murrelets, researchers are now finding more productive nesting sites with eggs intact in areas that had a history of predation.
This is one of our historic monitoring sites. This is Site 1, and there's an adult sitting in the site.
Biologists are finding that since the eradication, the hatching success of Scrips's murrelets has increased from 30% to 85%.
What we're seeing here at Anacapa Island 10 years post-rat eradication is a highly significant increase in hatching success, and nesting density, or the number of breeding pairs, has also increased.
Landing Cove nest site number 4. It's a site that's been active. When you look at areas like this at Landing Cove and other areas on the island that aren't in the sea caves, the growth rates in this area are upwards of 25% per annum. For a seabird, it's unheard of.
Resource managers now focus on removing invasive plants and replacing them with native plants that grow on the island to help create better nesting habitat for seabirds.
So now that the rats are gone, it really opens up a lot of opportunities for us for ecological restoration island-wide. We still have to make sure that the habitat is here on the islands and that the vegetation is suitable, and that we have soil that these birds can nest in.
Beyond restoration on individual islands, resource managers must continue to respond to the ongoing natural and human factors that impact marine environments throughout the world.
We still have to make sure that there's enough food in the ocean for these seabirds to feed on. We're looking at things like climate change and ocean acidification. So there will be continuous challenges.
Still, the legacy of this project is that there are strategic steps resource managers can take to catalyze ecological restoration.
It's just really satisfying to see the seabirds coming back to the island, and to see that the funds were directed in the most effective way they could be to really bring about substantial change.
I'm excited that Anacapa is part of the conservation history internationally. Being able to look at islands and identify conservation challenges and come up with strategies that will meet the needs of each of these different island ecosystems.
I was recently on Anacapa, and it's like, wow, we had an impact, a positive impact on this ecosystem here in Southern California. And it's paying dividends. The island is paying dividends, and it's going to continue paying dividends for future generations. I can't wait for my grandkids to have the opportunity to visit Anacapa.
Sorry guys, I meant to show the shorter version. You guys got the long version.
So you were one of the producers of that, right, Jen?
Yeah.
Very cool.
Very nice. Yeah, so there was a shorter version too, but let me stop it.
That is a really happy story.
Yeah, so it was a positive story after all.
That's great. Good work.
Yeah.
Nice to hear a happy story these days, for sure.
You guys can get out there and see it if you want, someday. It's not that hard to get to.
I would love to, Jen. That really, that inspiration point inspired me.
Yeah, that's quite a view. Anybody wants to come out and pull some weeds when COVID's over?
Let us know.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions?
No.
What? That's an awesome presentation.
Yeah.
So, Jen,
Well,
yeah.
Maybe we should organize a trip to go there.
Organize a Camino
Right.
there.
Yeah.
I'll pull weeds too. I'd love to.
Yeah, there's never a lack of that. So yeah, we'll have to see what we can do. Like I said, we've had some people come out, and like we bring a lot of school groups out and stuff like that. We've learned not to give like third graders like any tools though for weeding, because they were just whacking everything. So yeah, we managed that. But yeah, but it's great, and I love the planting too, because you get to really like, in a day you can really accomplish a lot of work, and it feels really rewarding, and you set up it well so that when you get there, they can utilize the volunteers, really effectively. So yeah, I'll have to try to get people out there. But they're great islands, a lot of resources, like really close to here. And a lot of people don't even know what that is. That's a national park, and that they can even go there. So Yeah.
Mhm. Exactly. This is so educational, just starting with that.
It's a
So
good
close to
success
home.
story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have it in our backyard, and yet we don't even take the
Right.
time.
Right.
So thank you. Thank you
Well,
for
thanks for joining, guys.
Thank
And
you.
for
Thank you,
inspiring
Jen.
us.
next week we'll be talking about the Grand Canyon,
Ah, all right.
rafting the Grand Canyon with Mom. So Mom will be back on again.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Jen. Great work.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Yeah, well
right.
done. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Bye.
Heather, if you're still there.
Bye, Jack.
Bye. Thanks for joining. How do I stop the recording? Stop recording.
It
Yes.
won't stop.
I want to make sure I save